How can the president possibly explain or justify this invasion and takeover of the government of another country in terms of America's national security needs? Well, I think that first of all, you have to understand that the president isn't going to have a fact-based discussion with the American people. The president's in the business of shaping perceptions. And that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to spend this as a great win for American national security because we have eliminated one of the main sources of the illegal flow of narcotics to the United States. Now, this is of course a lie. Venezuela is not the main source. Colombia, Mexico, they come from a lot of places. No fentanyl comes from Venezuela. It all comes across the Mexican border, or at least the majority of it. What Ritter is exposing here is perception management, not policy. Presidents don't lead with facts. They lead with narratives. Labeling something a national security win is meant to end the conversation, even when the facts don't support it. Fentanyl isn't coming from Venezuela in any serious way, but admitting the real sources would require harder, politically risky decisions. So instead, leadership opts for a simpler story that looks decisive on television. It's action for optics, not outcomes. And that gap is where public trust quietly erodes. So if we had a fact-based conversation, the president would be shown to be a liar. But that's not, again, I don't mean to be insulting too many people, but I'm going to insult a lot of people right now. The MAGA movement, is comprised of some of the most disguised the sin of ignorance. The American people are largely ignorant of the world we live in. We are extraordinarily ignorant about Venezuela. Therefore, we are susceptible to be told things and believe things as long as, we're not prompted to dig too deeply into the issues like drugs. We're told we have a drug problem. We do have a drug problem. We're told that we have a fentanyl problem. I think the statistics prove that. But then they say that Venezuela is the source of this, and getting rid of Maduro will go a long way to resolving this. That's a lie. Ritter's point is about narrative, not politics. When complex problems are simplified for public consumption, accuracy is often the first casualty. The U.S. does have a real fentanyl crisis, but blaming Venezuela and claiming regime change will fix it. Ignores how these networks actually work. It sounds decisive, but it avoids the harder truths, and policies built on that kind of simplification rarely solve anything. But what the president did here is he created a made-for-TV narrative. We went in and we got the bad guy and looked very easy because of course we're the strongest nation in the world under Donald Trump. And we don't want to dig into how this was so easy, how the CIA probably paid hundreds of millions of dollars directly or indirectly to the political elite, including the military and security forces of Venezuela, to step aside and let us do this staged event because this was a staged event. You don't go in with 2 troops of Delta Force into a hostile capital city and launch an assault of this nature unless everything was cleared in advance. That's the quickest way to lose 35 Delta troops. No, they went in, it was cleared hot to go in. It was a permissive environment. They got their made-for-TV moment and then they left, and Donald Trump's going to build on that. I think what you're going to see is that we have, over the course of the past several months, exploited both the sanctions and the possibility of lifting sanctions and the reality of the oil of the money that's attached to the flow of oil, and we bought out the political and economic elite of Venezuela, including those who just a week ago are saying that they're standing with Maduro for life. Well, apparently they have a price, and that price was paid, and we own them, and we own Venezuela. Now, I think for the president, this is about perception, and right now for the MAGA audience who doesn't ask a lot of discerning questions, this is a great victory. This is exactly what the president wanted. Ritter's argument here is that this wasn't a battlefield victory. It was a staged narrative. Operations like this don't happen unless the environment is already cleared politically and militarily. The goal wasn't risk or strategy. It was optics. A clean, made-for-TV moment that looks decisive and strong while avoiding uncomfortable questions about how it was actually achieved. In the end, this was about perception, not power. The president claims that this was the arrest of a fugitive from justice. The charges against him are grossly exaggerated. There's no mention of fentanyl whatsoever in the indictment against them. One of the charges against him is possession of a weapon and violation of the United States Firearms Act of 1934, which has since been found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. You can't say this with a straight face. How can somebody in Caracas, Venezuela, possessing a weapon that is lawful in Caracas, Venezuela, be indicted for violating American federal law? This is the nonsense that you are right. Donald Trump will try to sell to the American people. This is not a law enforcement event. This is an attack and takeover of the government of a foreign country which what Pete Hgsth and Marco Rubio are now going to rob. Calling this a law enforcement arrest doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The charges don't match the public claims. And applying U.S. federal law to actions that were legal inside another country makes no sense. That's not policing. It's power projection. Framing it as justice is meant to make it palatable, not accurate. This was not been a good week for America. It might be a good week for Donald Trump politically, but for America, this week showed that we were willing to risk global thermonuclear war to send a message to Vladimir Putin that we could target him when we wanted to target him. Because that's what happened with this drone attack. It was a CIA target, a CIA-run operation directed by the President of the United States to send a signal. And the thing is, the Russians know it. They turned over one of the recovered chips that have all the data on it. And if you know anything about targeting and intelligence and all this, the data proves that the CIA, that the United States was intimately involved, proves it. And the Russians handed it to the Americans. And they don't need to say it out loud. They just need to say, here, we know everything. And when you look at that chip, you'll know exactly what we know. Don't try to lie to us again. We know what you did. And this changes Russia's approach to the United States. It'll change their approach towards negotiations. I believe this wasn't just a tactical event. It was a strategic signal and a dangerous one. When actions risk escalation between nuclear powers, perception matters as much as intent, sending messages through covert force changes. How the other side calculates trust, restraint, and negotiation. Once that line is crossed, diplomacy becomes harder, suspicion deepens, and the margin for error shrinks dramatically. And then what we did in Venezuela again is just a signal that the United States is a rogue nation. We operate void of any notion of international law, and it's not even open for speculation anymore. Will Vladimir Putin trust Donald Trump again? No. I mean again, I can't speak for Vladimir Putin and I can't speak for anybody in the Russian government. But first of all, we have to understand that Vladimir Putin always said that he doesn't trust anybody. He's the president of Russia. His job isn't to trust anybody. His job is to look out for the best interests of Russia. Having said that, there are people that you can work with on a collegial basis. Trust but verify perhaps. The Russians, of course, aren't going to stop having diplomatic relations with the United States. But I think this was a cold shower for the Russians. The reality that the United States government, especially led by Donald Trump, is incapable of negotiating in good faith, that we are duplicitous. We lie. We can't be trusted on anything. Actions like this don't just affect one country. They redefine how the United States is perceived globally. When international law appears optional and signals replace diplomacy, trust erodes fast. Negotiations don't end, but they harden. Expectations change, skepticism deepens, and every future agreement is approached with caution rather than confidence. That's the long-term cost of acting without credibility. Is Trump buying himself another Vietnam? I don't believe so. I think that this operation appears to have been crafted to avoid that situation. Why do I say that? This isn't your classic regime change operation where, for instance, when we got rid of Saddam Hussein, one of the first things that Paul Beimamer did is disband the Iraqi military, thereby creating a vacuum of authority and legitimacy. The Venezuelan Ministry of Defense is intact, led by the Minister of Defense. The Ministry of Interior is intact, led by the Minister of Interior. And we're not making any moves to remove them from power at this juncture. So the structures of security that existed under Maduro exist to this day. Same people, same soldiers, same barracks. The only difference is that the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Defense appear to be taking orders from the United States, from the CIA, from the State Department, from the people who paid them off. And if that's the case and these people can, maintain security, there's no and they toe the line, there's no need for the United States to put boots on the ground. Donald Trump knows for a fact that he doesn't have a 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 excess troops to go into Venezuela, and he knows what would happen if he did do that. When he says boots on the ground, he's basically talking about a repeat of the Delta Force raid last night. That we could go in and take out the Minister of Defense if we wanted to. We could take out the Minister of Interior. That any one of these elites that have signed up to this and said we're here to support this post-Maduro exercise, if they forget what they promised, we can go in and take them out with boots on the ground. But I don't think Donald Trump is talking about a large-scale, military deployments into Venezuela. It's not needed because basically we own the Venezuelan military and we own the Venezuelan security forces. This isn't being framed as another Vietnam because it avoids occupation. The existing power structures remain in place, but loyalty is redirected rather than dismantled. That removes the need for large troop deployments while keeping leverage through pressure and threat. This control without invasion. Quieter, cheaper, and politically safer, but still deeply destabilizing in the long run. President, why is running a country in South America first? Well, I think it is because we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. We want to surround ourselves with stability. We want to surround ourselves with energy. We have tremendous energy in that country. It's very important that we protect it. We need that for ourselves. We need that for the world. And we want to make sure we can protect it. Other words, we'll steal whatever we can. Yeah. Look, this Venezuela exercise if it goes off the way Trump wants it to go off. I hate to say well because well implies that somehow that justifies what he did. The ends do not justify the means. Trump has said things, for instance, the reality of fentanyl, this isn't resolving that problem. This Americans will continue to die in large numbers because of fentanyl. That fentanyl is coming over the border from Mexico. So what are we going to go in and take out the Mexican president next? Because the president has said that the drug cartels in Mexico are a big problem. He's creating a parallel argument for Mexico to apply the Venezuelan solution. What about Colombia? One of the biggest sources of narcotics. All the things that we've accused Venezuela of doing is actually coming out of Colombia. Are we going to remove the Colombian leadership? This is the path that we're headed on right now. This is America first. This is, make America great again. It's about, and again, I called this back in April. I said that this president is moving towards a Fortress America mindset, that we are going to decouple ourselves to the extent possible from Europe, from the Middle East, to concentrate our forces here in our own hemisphere where we will be extraordinarily aggressive. Wait for Panama. That ain't done yet. Wait for Peru. There's a big port facility in Peru where China is shipping in containers that then go on a railroad that go to Brazil, bypassing the Panama Canal. How long do you think Trump's going to let that port facility function the way it is? If the Peruvian government won't shut it down, there won't be a Peruvian government in place that does. This is the standard that Donald Trump has set. This logic stretches America first into something far more aggressive. Stability and energy security are being used as justification for intervention even when the problem cited won't actually be solved by it. Once that reasoning is accepted, it doesn't stop at one country. It becomes a template applied wherever interests are at stake. And that's how restraint quietly disappears. Now the purpose of the sanctions policy is to bring about economic despair, economic harm. And then what happens is when the people are impacted in a negative fashion economically, then you create the false illusion of a gateway to salvation. If you just do what we tell you to do, we can lift the sanctions and you can be everything is going to be good. And if you buy into that lie, you've created leverage now because what you've done is create hope that will not manifest itself. And that could be turned into, fuel for opposition against the government in place. This is what happened in Venezuela. We basically ask yourself this why Venezuela while Venezuela was under a naval blockade? Remember, we're boarding ships and doing all this stuff. Why did I think it was between 4 and 8 tankers, oil tankers leave Venezuelan ports bound for the United States? Because those tankers carried oil for Chevron. And what we did there is show the Venezuelans that we could shut down your oil, but we can also let your oil flow. And when that oil flows, money accrues to people. And all you people that wanted a better life with the lifting of sanctions now see the light. All you have to do now is play our game. And our game is Maduro's got to go. And they fell for it. That's what's happening in Iran today. The Iranians have allowed themselves to buy into the notion that sanctions could be lifted. And that creates economic hope. That isn't realized, that creates despair, that creates the opportunity for an opposition to arise, and that's what we see, and this is what could happen in Russia. We have the sanctions in place now. You have killed Dmitry meeting with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. I mean, the most unconventional diplomatic interface the world's ever seen, and all they're talking about is economic potential, economic potential, economic potential. At the same time they're doing this, the CIA launches attack against the Russian president's residence. Now, they weren't going to kill Putin, but it sent a signal. We can get you and we're getting you. We're trying to get you in a time when we're pretending to have diplomat. We embarrassed you. This attack was designed to show President Putin as weak. We, at the same time that we were telling the Russian people who are suffering from sanctions that your life could be better if you just bettered relations with us. But now Putin, because Trump, I'm very upset with Putin about Ukraine. This is the game that's being played right now to bring down the Russian government. It's the same thing we successfully did in Venezuela. Now, I'm not saying Delta Force is going to go into the Kremlin and pull out Putin. It's not. But what they're trying to do is create domestic unrest. This is the same old policy we had before. The Russians have to wake up, and they have to wake up to realize that the United States can't be trusted. This explains how sanctions are often used less as policy and more as leverage. Economic pain creates desperation, and desperation is paired with promises of relief that may never arrive. That false hope can be weaponized to stir unrest and pressure governments from within. When diplomacy and coercion run in parallel, trust collapses. And once that happens, every offer of cooperation is viewed as a trap, not a solution.